Hello everyone. This is a talk that I gave at FOSDEM 2025. It was the final talk in the social web dev room and related content track. So this was really kind of the closing moment of our social web content at FOSDEM 2025. And I'd like to repeat it for you now because I know that not everybody was able to attend our social hour. Now, it may not have escaped your notice that this is the state of the online world in early 2025. I think we're all reasonably aware that, in the words of benevolent tech entrepreneur Mark Zuckerberg, the world needs a lot of masculine energy right now. More seriously, around the world right now, we see changes that challenge the freedoms that the internet has shown us all. Within the past couple of weeks, since the transition of power in the United States, we've also seen unprecedented purges of information from the internet. It's no exaggeration to say that our freedoms are at risk. My name is Andy Piper. You may know me as a developer advocate on the internet, and one of the ways that I contribute to the web and open source in practical terms is that I work with the Mastodon team on developer relations and community. So in this talk, we're going to cover the decentralized social web and why that's important right now more than ever. If you were at FOSDEM 2025 in Brussels at the beginning of February, then there was a Birds of a Feather session as part of the social web content. And as part of that, there was a talk by someone, a lady called Melanie Bartos, who gave a wonderful talk about the importance of civic institutions embracing the new social web. And if you were in the room for that talk, or if you've seen her content elsewhere, then you may have seen or heard some of the themes I'm going to be talking about. I'm not going to apologise for that, partly because, of course, not everybody was at FOSDEM in the room, and also because these are important themes that we need to keep talking about. So let's get started. Last year, in the middle of 2024, the billionaire owner of a major social media platform decided to start attacking elected officials of my home country. The same elected officials, same politicians, have accounts on that platform, and it became clear that this was not an ideal state of affairs. Now, I'm not making a point about my home country particularly here. I know that this is not an isolated incident, and that many other countries and politicians around the world are facing similar challenges with this particular individual. That incident and other social conversations in my personal online circle at that time led me to write this blog post, Fediverse for Freedom. And if you actually go to fediverseforfreedom.com right now, I will redirect you to this blog post. And in that, I talked about why I believe it is time, beyond time, for civic institutions, organisations, governments to own their own voices on the internet, run their own social platforms. So let's talk about the choices for organisations making decisions about their online presence. Here are some options. There are a few places where governments, as one example of a civic institution, can choose to host their online presence. In the United States, one of those places is Threads. Threads is a Meta-owned and operated platform. The previous American administration had a presence there and could be followed on the Fediverse, assuming that you were in a country where Threads Fediverse features were enabled and that your instance, your Mastodon instance, for example, had not blocked Threads. So, for example, I was able to follow the White House on Threads from my Mastodon account in the UK, but that wasn't an option for everyone across the EU where some of those Fediverse features from Threads were not enabled. And right now, of course, with the recent changes to Facebook and Meta's fact-checking and moderation approaches, many more Fediverse servers are starting to wonder whether they want to connect with Threads, and that is their sovereign right to make a choice and decide which other services and instances to federate with. Now, another option is Blue Sky, and that looks great, has a large audience, but I would argue that it does not have a clear future ownership model. It's VC funded. It's pretty clear that they will need to add advertising and some other revenue things in there. And at the moment, as far as I can tell, it's not very straightforward to run and host your own content on Blue Sky. So I'm not convinced that it can work well in terms of where data is stored if, for example, you're a government that is overseas from the United States. Now, whilst FOSDEM was happening that weekend at the beginning of February, if folks were not following the news, then everyone at FOSDEM was in a nice tech bubble. We were having a great time meeting with our friends in the open source community. But one of the announcements that came out, one of the things that happened in the rest of the world at that time, was the US National Transportation Safety Board announced that it would stop sending out updates to journalists about the recent plane crash in the DC area to the media. They would stop sending them via email. Instead, they would exclusively post via X. Now, that's a lovely, lovely organization, isn't it? If you happen to have the owner of that social media platform, best friends and strongly part of the new US administration. But talk about the tech oligarchy, really, really troubling times. So the option to me for these kind of organizations is really clear. The Fediverse, the activity pub-based social web. And this talk came at the end of a series of content about the social web at FOSDEM. And so let's take a pause and talk about how we got to this point. Now, at the beginning of 2024 at FOSDEM, I was able to persuade the Mastodon team to come along and run a stand at FOSDEM for the first time. But I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit concerned about it. Now, first of all, I just want to say also that it was the very first time that the folks working on the core team building Mastodon had actually met in person all together, which was wonderful. Really good opportunity, but those things don't happen very often when we work in distributed open source projects with folks in different countries. But I was worried about the idea that Mastodon would have a table in the FOSDEM halls, and I'll tell you why. I know that Mastodon is not the Fediverse, okay? In fact, when I originally gave this talk, I was wearing a t-shirt that showed a list of other Fediverse related projects to demonstrate really that, yes, I work on the Mastodon team, but it's part of a larger community of projects, and that's really important. And so I was worried that people would come by our stand and give us a hard time about Mastodon in general, their views about our project. We didn't. We had a lot of gratitude from people visiting our stand at FOSDEM in 2024, and that was of course wonderful to hear. As developers, we don't often hear from people that use the software in those kind of terms, and it was really nice for everyone on the team to hear. And we also got to talk to people across the table from other projects that are developing software that are part of the Fediverse. I believe, if I remember rightly, I talked to one of the folks from Funkwell. I met Matt from the Write Freely project. I met a gentleman that was working on MBin, and there was a lot of interest and activity. And I kind of said, hey, this is great. We should have a Fediverse track next year. So we all left FOSDEM, and I kind of had this thought in my head that it would be great to do something around the Fediverse. Now, thanks to the Social Web Foundation, Evan Prodromou, he was able to propose a social web dev room and make it happen. So in 2025, this year, we had a really packed track in the dev room, a variety of talks all across the Activity Pub ecosystem. We had a birds of a feather session with some more talks, and then we had a social hour with even more talks. It was really, really exciting. Everybody was talking to one another. We had some side conversations, those serendipitous exchanges of ideas that you don't get unless you're there together. And we also have ongoing series of events. There's a series called Fediverse that happens twice a year, thanks to Johannes Ernst and his team, and it's a great place for folks to meet. So just a little bit of a recap of how we came to have this social web track. I was really excited to have everybody come along this year. Let's go back to the story that we were originally telling. It's more important than ever for governments and civic institutions to have control over their online presence and not have that be subject to the whims of a US-based tech company. The Fediverse is a great option for that. It's a set of open standards and protocols, and it's not owned by any one company. Now, I do work on the Mastodon project, and in case you haven't heard, we are in the process of setting up an EU-based non-profit to look after the governance of the project, explicitly to ensure that it is not subject to the whims of any individual. Wouldn't it be better if our civic spaces online were run by our community for our community, rather than dictated by opaque algorithms and corporate interests? In Melanie Bartos's talk, she made what was, to me, compelling argument that the Fediverse as a whole is a public interest technology. Instead of being at the mercy of corporate social media, our local government and institutions could create an online space that actually prioritize public engagement, transparency, accessibility, all of the things that are important in those communities, without the spam, ads, or algorithmic manipulation that comes with a lot of data gathering. Now, by the way, one size does not fit all here. I am not here to advocate for every government and civic institution to run their own Mastodon instance, not at all. But with Fediverse technology, you have the option to self-host or run your own instances. So, for example, a local government or university or library may want to run something like a threaded conversational community. NodeBB is now part of the Fediverse, or a publishing platform like Ghost, and the list goes on. So there's lots of options here. Right now, we are seeing terrifying quantities of public information being purged from the internet. And what we're seeing, fortunately, is the internet communities rally around to try to save some of that information, to archive it, to run their own services, to save content from US government websites that are being taken down. Now, if a platform like one of those government agencies, or say X, please, can collapse or just vanish in a year, what's stopping other platforms from following suit? Hosting our own instances means that we control our digital infrastructure and we're not caught off guard by sudden policy changes or platform shutdowns. Well, this all sounds lovely, right? But where is it actually happening? Well, one outcome for us on the Mastodon team of being at FOSDEM in 2024 was that we had folks from different EU member state governments come to talk to us. And there's a very strong interest in Activity Pub and the federated ecosystem in Europe. Now, I wish I could say the same about that for my home country, the UK. maybe that will change, but at the moment that seems to be a very slow level of interest. It's a bit frustrating. But in the case of the EU, the Mastodon team, the Mastodon project actually hosts the EU Mastodon instance. And we're open to talking to other governments and institutions about helping with their own instances as well. Now, believe it or not, there is no master plan for the Mastodon team to run either one large instance or to host a majority of large instances or all of the instances for all governments everywhere. Well, that's not the plan, okay? You may have heard that from some people. I know that lots of people like to come to their own conclusions in the open source community, but it's really, really important for there to be a diverse network of instances for resilience, absolutely, for resilience, for diversity, for different communities to exist and bloom and cooperate. There are great local communities as well. So, for example, the city of Amsterdam has their own server. Also, city of Bonn in Germany, where the local administrators are doing a lot to bring the community together, and that's really, really wonderful to see. And yet, in Melanie Bartos's talk at FOSDEM, she actually mentioned that of 62 German institutions, I believe they were universities, educational institutions, that left X, only 13 of them moved to the Fediverse, and only one of them is running their own instance. Running digital services requires consistent investment and some level of maintenance. Discovery is not always straightforward. That's something that we are trying to address with the Fediscovery project that is EU NGI search funded. And organizations often seek reach and then want measurement. They want the maximum reach with the minimum effort, because everybody is poor for time and for money. I understand that. The Fediverse is a different environment, and right now many of the platforms fall short of some of those requirements or asks from institutions. Another thing that I wrote about in my blog post last year is that deciding on who might qualify for an account on a sovereign platform is tricky. So, for example, if you have an account for your parliament, for elected individuals, then it may make sense for all of the current elected members of parliament to have official accounts on a national server. However, it's harder to justify any political party or those who are not elected, for example, to have official accounts on the same platform. This is an area where I believe that we need to do a lot of work to improve data and account portability as the Fediverse grows. There's some initiatives such as the Lola proposal at the W3C to help with some of these things, but it's still a challenge. There's a lot of work to do, but we do that work together. It's the open social web. We do that by showing up, by talking to each other, by sharing our experiences, and by building the tools and the communities that we need. So let's save the social web together. Thank you.